Hi, this is Kyle. Obviously, you know that because, well, you're on this channel and seeing this. I assure you that this is not a forced video. There's no one holding me hostage. I made this of my own free will. Well, maybe not. I guess if you talk to Dennett, Sam Harris, Rosenberg et al., maybe I didn't do it of my own free will. And that's just tongue in cheek. But maybe I am hostage in the sense that we're still sort of on house arrest because of the pandemic. And this video is not about that, strictly speaking, although I want to make a quick point about it. Because it's going on, because we're in the midst of, for most of us, what, if you could combine Dickens and someone like Steven Pinker, we might end up with a kind of, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times scenario. For many of us, that's what this is. This will have been the best of times in the sense that we have access to so much great technology and commodities, and yet it will have been the worst time because, as I speak right now, approximately 3,000 of my fellow citizens are dying every day. So during times like this, I tend to fall back on one of my immature defense mechanisms, and that is to intellectualize everything. I want to try to make sense of things. I want to try to know the answer. I think one of the reasons for this is that by trying to figure things out, it gives me the illusion that I have some control over the matter. So when you're impacted by a trauma or a tragedy, or even operating under normative uncertainty, sometimes your locus of control starts to move outside of yourself, and you need some effort to bring it back so that you can return to a sense of stasis. And for me, I think that that's what all of this question asking is really about. I want to have some efficacy and some sense of power when really I'm powerless against a virus that no doubt would rip through my body if I was exposed to it. I think I said recently that my immune system is so compromised that it probably comes with its own compromat, and it probably has a full Russian dossier on it. That's how compromised my immune system is. And so I am in hiding. I'm in isolation, and my wife is doing an amazing job of trying to make sure that I'm protected, that our baby's protected, and that she's protected, because babies are little vectors. They just go around picking up things, putting things in their mouths. They touch each other's nose. They touch each other's snot. I know it's gross, but it's just true. And as soon as they start ambulating a little bit, they're able to like get at each other more, and they get up in each other's faces, and they come home and they give you coronaviruses. And so I certainly don't want the one that's going around right now, because the coronaviruses we've gotten from our baby over the past few months have been bad enough. What does that have to do? Why am I talking about that? Well, look, one of the books that I most love and hate from C.S. Lewis is The Great Divorce. Why do I love it? I love it because I think it does one of the best jobs at giving you a narrative which you can, there's a term in common media research that's called transportation. The better the narrative is, the more transportation occurs. You're actually engaged in it. It brings you into this story. And the concept of heaven and hell is for, I think, in an over-industrialized society, these are concepts that are just really difficult for us to even fathom. And we probably don't fathom them nearly enough. And so he does a really good job of putting you in this story where you can experience characters as they wrestle with these two extremes. So I love it for that reason, and I hate it because it convicts me on almost every level. Almost every character in it, you can draw something out of it that mirrors perhaps something in your own life. And the one character that I most want to talk about right now is the bishop. The bishop, I think he figures in chapter 5, and he's a theologian. He's a progressive theologian, and he considers himself to be very, very heroic for the strongly held opinions that he has. And interestingly enough, he finds himself in hell, and he has the opportunity to leave. He has the opportunity to divorce himself from the things that have held him captive and enter heaven. He has multiple opportunities to do that, and he doesn't. But it's not for the reason you might think. It's because he is so convinced that his life, as he holds it to be, even in hell, is one that he can cultivate a community there where he's able to be useful and have status, and he's able to have some impact. He's had a very famous title in the world. He's made a lot of money. He's very popular. And so in hell, that sort of gets to continue. In heaven, there's really no need for him. There's no use for him in the sort of utilitarian sense. Beyond all of that, he has to also give up his lecturing, his sermonizing, his philosophizing, his theological attempts to make sense of the coming kingdom, even though it's already there. He would rather continue to think about it and talk about it and ask questions about it than actually experience it. And so finally, one of the characters who's trying to lead him towards heaven says to him, I want to take you not to the land of questions, but to answers. I want to take you to a place where you will see the face of God. That is me. Oh, it hurts. It hurts to say that. But in many ways, I'm the bishop. Right? I'm so attached to my question asking, my philosophizing about things, that I don't want to give that up. And it's not just that. I don't want to give up my gripes, my qualms. I don't want to give up the times that I've been wronged, because seeing the face of God means changing your frame from the finite, the mundane, not that there's anything wrong with those things, to the infinite. To see the face of God is to be transformed from what we are now into this thing that we know not of, not yet anyway. We have glimpses of of what that will be like in the life of Christ, the resurrection body. But even there, it's very mystical for me. I don't understand quite what it's like. And perhaps that's because not everything lends itself easily to words. Some things have to be experienced. But I'm not a person who likes to let go of control. And I go on asking my questions. God, why? Why are we in the midst of a pandemic? Why are people dying? If you were really good, how could you let this happen? The theodicy questions, the problem of evil. But no one ever wants to talk about the problem of goodness. No one wants to talk about, despite the fact that there are all these horrible things going on, that there are innumerable amounts of really wonderful things that I don't think we have any reasonable expectation, no rational justification for expecting in a universe that we find ourselves in. If there's no God, I don't know why we would think that anyone should do good at all. And I don't think just altruism, one gene getting passed on to into the future, propagating itself as long as it can, accounts for doctors and nurses and medical staff and electricians and plumbers and food service employees, pharmacists, pharmacy techs. The list goes on and on. Those people who are putting their lives on the line, it isn't just genes driving them. There's goodness there. There are people who are putting their lives on the line to save strangers all of the time, hours and hours a day, knowing they're exposing themselves and that they themselves could succumb. Just note that well, 80+% of you may be fine if you get it. Where do you think the 20% comes from? I don't know what people think that means whenever they hear it. Well, if you're young and healthy, then chances are you're going to be fine. Only we're talking about a statistical phenomenon, right? When you're talking about the world of statistics, it's very different than the individual. I think one of the analyses that came out about COVID-19 is that it essentially compresses all of the risk you would run for meeting your own demise in 1 year. It compresses that into 2 weeks. So every threat that might be facing you over the course of a year, you experience in 14 days. I don't know about you, even if you're young and healthy, that's still not odds that I would like to play. I had a friend text me and say she needed to speak. And I said, let me call you back. I was actually spending time with my family, and I didn't really know how serious the nature of the call would be. When I got on the phone with her, she was crying. She was grieving very hard because she was experiencing an immense loss. And during these times where the sacraments and rituals around birth and death have been interrupted, suddenly and radically, very hard for us to make sense of that. Mothers who are giving birth without their significant other by their side, babies being taken from them because of this virus. People who are losing loved ones. One, the loved one is alone, sometimes on a ventilator, and there's no recourse for them. there's nothing more that anyone could do for them. And sometimes just the act of being with someone is all that could be given to them and all that could be asked for. And even that's being taken. And that's brutal. But then it goes a step further. And the natural right of honoring a loved one or a family member or a friend who died, that being interrupted. I mean, go back and read Homer. I mean, this stuff matters deeply to us. Look at the Ebola crisis in 2014, I think. There, people were touching the bodies of their loved ones after they had succumbed to Ebola, not knowing that that's when the virus was shedding the most and the body itself was the most infectious. How do you tell someone not to do something as natural as cry over their loved one that they're seeing for the last time? So this thing is going, it's cutting against the sort of naturalness of our responses. And in talking with my friend, she was feeling very insignificant. She was feeling like her life was not meaningful because she's in quarantine and she had been undergoing cancer treatment for many months now. She hadn't had a lot of interaction with people before the lockdown occurred. And then once the lockdown occurred, she hadn't seen or heard from anyone. And then experiencing a loss and not being able to properly grieve in the way that she might want to and feel that she needs to was just a bridge too far. And so when I was talking to her about the feeling, what was driving this feeling of insignificance, she told me that because no one seemed to care about her in the way that she needed them to. She needed them to express concern for her in a way that was different than how people were responding. What's so peculiar to me is that very morning, I had watched, my wife and I came in the room, our baby's laying there and she's waking up. And as soon as she sees my wife, she just throws her arms wide and she says, "Mama!" And they just embrace in this bear hug and they fall over just hugging. And I was standing there watching them and I thought about my friend. I thought about the fact that months prior, when she was visiting with us, she watched as my baby ran up to my wife and threw her arms open and grabbed her. She gives the best bear hugs in the world. I say that knowing that I'm biased as a father, but if you got a hug from her, you'd say the same thing. It's pretty amazing. And so she just goes for it. She doesn't give you like one of these little chicken wings, whatever. She just gets in there. And so as they're just hugging like this, my friend says to me, "I don't know if I've ever been that loved." And I asked her, what do you mean? And she was like, I'm watching this and I don't know if I was ever held like that. It almost makes me want to go back and be a baby all over again so that I could be held like that and feel that kind of love. Look at the two of them. I was like, yeah, it is pretty special, but I mean, it just seemed like it was natural. It just seemed like it was commonplace. That's just how they interacted. So fast forward to a few days ago, when we walk into the baby's room and my wife and the baby start hugging, and that embrace, suddenly that thought came back into my head. The echo of my friend's voice comes back and I was like, yes, you know what? It really is dramatic and it really does exemplify love and connection and some kind of shared communion They conspire together. Those who share breath, they are conspirators, right? It's a beautiful thing to watch. And so as I'm sitting there watching it, I'm having this reflexive moment where I'm saying, wow, this is like my friend said. And then I'm having this meta moment where I'm saying, why am I thinking about my friend and what she said about the two of them during this intimate moment? Why did that thought come into my head at this moment? And then a few minutes later, I got the text from her. Now, I'm not saying they're related in any way. I'm just saying that it was interesting to me that I had that thought. And so when I was talking to her and she was telling me what was going on and about how insignificant she felt, I said, hold on a second. Just a little while ago, my own private life, the interior dark corridors of my mind were infiltrated by your frame. The framework, the lens that you saw my wife and child through suddenly became the frame, the lens that I saw them through. You may not think that's profound, but I do, because I didn't ask for it. It impinged on me. It influenced me without me asking it to. And so what kind of force is that? How significant must you be that from great distance away from one another, an event that had happened months prior, suddenly, in a beautiful, intimate moment in my own life, breaks through, and I see it through your eyes. I see it through your frame. And I don't know how that will change me both now and in perpetuity. Into the future, how will that interaction have changed my life and changed the course of my life? You get into something like the butterfly effect. And we're not even interested in running any kind of extrapolation on that. I'm just saying that it's unknown to me, and that just a simple interaction like that can have that effect, because my frame shifted. To bring it full circle, there is a land, but not a land of questions, of answers, a land where we shall see the face of God. I think one reason why I intellectualize, and one reason why I'm like the bishop, is because to be in communion with God, to embrace God as my wife and my child do, it means to give up my right to my frame, my lens, because as long as I'm seeing things through my eyes, I get to determine how I think things should be, how they ought to be. And if I could for a moment see the world through God's eyes, it would change my perspective infinitely. To have that frame, to have that lens filter out my doubts, my questions, my concerns, and suddenly be flooded with knowing, but not just cognitive knowing. It is one reason why English is a little, it underperforms in this kind of way, like knowing in Spanish. You can know of something, and then you can know something, you can know someone. And me just saying I could know doesn't carry the same weight. I'm talking about an intimacy that when you say you know your significant other, it's to know facts about them, it's to know their dispositions, it's also to know something about how they view certain circumstances. And so right now, it's a perfectly good time for someone like me who wants to be a bishop, who wants to philosophize about everything, who wants to turn to theological writings. And listen, those things are great. I'm not bashing them at all. I've spent an inordinate amount of my time in life studying those things. Shout out to my peeps, to Dr. Warner, who taught me well, to Dr. Halstead, who taught me well, to Dr. Flaming, and many others who taught me theology. And were great instructors, and more than that, great mentors to me. I spent a lot of time at Oxford delving into the old books, the old languages, and that's incredibly meaningful. But I'm just saying that at some point I have to surrender that. And perhaps it would be the case for me that it could be the best of times, even if it were the worst of times, to be in a land where I'm not consumed with questions. I'm not even worried about answers. I'm consumed with the face of God. That is where I need to get to. And I think that those invasions can happen in the here and now. I don't think we have to wait until we die. Maybe not, maybe we're not going to see the face of God per se, but I think we can get intimations for sure. I think we can experience God's perspective. Notice I didn't say we can't just know, although that may be possible, but I said we get to experience God's perspective. And that's something that isn't just here, but it's all of us. The peace of God that surpasses all understanding is what I'm after. I just have an infinite frame problem.